Um, how many people here play Scrabble? The reason why I ask this is that I don't know if you heard about this thing recently. It featured in the news items in this last week, but there is a guy by the name of Nigel Smith. He's a Kiwi. Did you read this? Nigel Smith, and he's this really shy, kind of introverted Kiwi guy, but he's just won this World Scrabble Championship, and he's won it for the 4th time. And I thought, I hate Scrabble. I mean, I hate it. Ruby loves it, so we don't get to play with each other, at least not in that area. And so, yes. That could have been taken 1,000 ways. Anyway, this guy, I read the story with much interest, and it went on to say in this thing that he has recently won also the French title of Scrabble. And I thought, this is absolutely remarkable. And so I read further, and it says that he doesn't know the French language. And yet he won the French Scrabble contest. And I thought, how do you do that if you don't know the French language? Did you read this? And I thought, how do you do that? And basically what happened was he picked up a French dictionary and over 7 weeks memorized the dictionary. Now, look, when I read that, I thought, obviously this guy, he has a knack. He has a natural ability, he has a skill, arguably something that he was born with, of memorization. You know, if someone came to him and said, how the heck do you do that? He would probably say, I was kind of born with it. Now, how many here have a natural ability? You know, it's something that you were born with. It is not something that it's kind of a skill. It's a natural talent. It's a knack. How many here have, it could be in the area of numbers. It could be the area of, painting. It could be in the area of art. It could be in the area of languages. It could be in the area of whatever. How many here have got a natural ability, a knack? Tell the person next to you. Okay, here we go, people. Just out of interest, who here can actually name something that they have a natural ability in? Show of hands. Only a few. I mean, personally, I'm with the rest. I can't think of any natural ability that I was sort of born with. But other people, they can, and so be it. Now, there is another type of ability, and this is the thing that Ruby and I want to share with you this morning. Because there are these abilities that you are born with, and they're kind of called creation gifts. They come by virtue of being created as a human being. But there is another type of ability that you and I can receive when we come into a connection with God through Jesus Christ. In other words, when we are born from above. And when we are born from above, another life comes to live in our life, and that is the life of the Holy Spirit. And that Holy Spirit gives us a divine enabling to do things that we could not do otherwise if it wasn't for the power of the Holy Spirit. Are you with me? So to help you kind of come to grips with this, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born from above at about 20. And I'll never forget, I was in this room, and I think I've shared part of that story with you before. And I was in this room, and I said to Jesus, Jesus, I give away my life for the rest of my life. I give you my solemn pledge of loyalty, my sacred vow. And at that very time, I heard an inaudible whisper. And the inaudible whisper, do you know what I mean by these inaudible whispers? I heard this, and it was kind of like this God at the center of the universe, the God on the throne in heaven. And this God, in terms of an inaudible whisper, through the Spirit that had come to indwell within me, whispered to me, Mick, I want you to be a speaker to many different people in many different places. And I thought, whoa. And then I thought, no. Because right up until that time, I had never given a public talk in my life. And in fact, when people came to me and they asked me to stand in front of a group, be it ever so small, I ran 100 miles. I just didn't want to be in that space. And so when I heard this whisper say, oh, Mick, I want you to be a speaker to many different groups in many different places, well, I was scared, and you can finish the sentence. I was so scared. But something was welling up within me. I nearly fell off then, by the way. But but something kind of welled up within me, and I wanted to, but I didn't want to do this thing. Can you relate? I wanted to, but didn't want to. And then at that time, I went to this church, and I enrolled in this kind of small group Bible study on Saturday mornings. And after several months, the leader of the small group Bible study said, oh, every one of you here is going to have an opportunity to give a 5-minute talk. Who would like to be the first? Guess whose hand went up? Moi. So I put my hand up, and that week I sweated that 5-minute talk. I just invested way too much emotional energy into that 5-minute talk, And then I gave this 5-minute talk, and the Bible class leader noticed something. And so the Bible class leader mentioned, this Mick guy, not too bad, no. And so maybe he said to the pastor, maybe you should have this guy up front, on a Sunday night. And so they planted me one Sunday night up the front. And again, I was scared, everything else. And I just, you just pack yourself and all sorts of things. And I was just nervous but I did this talk. And at the end of a talk, 4 independent people came up asking me to speak elsewhere. And then over the last 40 years, the invites from around the world have come in. And now I'm with you. Can you hear the music? Isn't this so good? And when you've got a kind of a spiritual gift, it's like the door's open for you. And so I found myself at one time in Fiji, and while I was there, I was asked to speak to the politicians and the political generals who had just recently staged a coup d'etat. And I was taken out to Nukulu Island to kind of speak to this group in a prison. Now, how does that happen? I'll never forget, I was in Queensland at one stage, and there had been the Bali bombings. Do you remember that? The Bali bombings. And some of the victims were returning to this part of Queensland, and they were broken, and they were distorted, and they were twisted, and they had bandages, and they were bloodied, and they were bruised, and they had a memorial service, and they were all there with their families. And who was asked to speak to them? How does that happen? In terms of numbers over the 40 years that I've been a mouth, in terms of the numbers, the lowest number I've had, I think it was about 1 or 2. Taranaki. Okay? And I think the highest number's been about, 10,000 in London. And everything in between. I mean, one of my most special moments happened this year. I'm the only Christian in my family. And my kind of family are self-confessed sort of atheistic. And I've been this communicator with the spiritual gift for about, as I say, 40 plus years. And my mother, for example, has never heard me. Never once. And I was down to speak in Whanganui where we live, and I was speaking in the main Anglican church there some months ago. And I didn't tell her, but she found out from someone else that I was going to speak. And so she decided to come. And 2 days before she came, I was just visiting my mum. And she said, I'm going to come and hear you speak. I thought, oh no, you know. And I went back home and I changed my topic. I changed, and do you know what I talked about? I said, my topic is, what is the gospel of Jesus Christ? It was so special having my mum there. So people, if you don't mind me saying so, other people tell me this anyway. They say, Mick, you have a bit of an ability to be a mouth, to be a speaker, to be a communicator. I could never do this if it wasn't for the enabling power and presence of the Holy Spirit. You have to believe me. This is not a commentary on Mick Duncan. This is a commentary on the generosity, the lavish love of God. Do I get nervous? You bet. And Ruby will just tell you, each and every time with my particular spiritual gift, and it applies to most people with their spiritual gifts, I get nervous. I get sweaty palms. Don't come near me. My breath is somewhat acidic. I mean, honestly, I get nervous. I mean, do I have to work hard? You bet. I mean, it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 7. It says in 1 Timothy chapter 4. Paul is saying, he's saying, you've got this gift, but work hard at it. Work hard. Do the hard yards. Do the pain with that which you've been given. So Ruby will tell you, I'm often up at 4 o'clock in the morning before my day job, doing the hard yards and the pain and the study around what I have to do. Now, you'll have a different spiritual gift, but all of us have to work hard at it. Do I fail? Oh, the number of times that I've spoken, and I wish there was a trapdoor that I could suddenly disappear halfway through. Because there are times where, I mean, it's been a bomb. It's been a dud. And I just want to disappear. Because when you fail with the gift that I've got, it's so public. And sometimes you just want to disappear. Is it scary? Last night I had to speak at the Justice Conference here in Auckland. Both Ruby and I were speaking. And I had something prepared. And I was due to get all mic'd up and all this sort of stuff. And I came into the auditorium. And as I got to a seat, suddenly I had another inaudible whisper. And the whisper was, Mick, that which you have prepared, you're not to do. Instead, I want you to do something else that you're not prepared to do and you ain't got any notes. It was so scary. Honestly, I was shaking, visibly shaking. Ruby saw me. I mean, I was just so on edge. Is it fun? This is the best thing other than Jesus Christ that has ever happened in my life. Honestly. Ruby, yeah.
Well, hi. There's other good things in your life, darling.
Oh, that's right.
I'll never forget in the first year of our marriage, and out of love for me, I came home one day and Mick had bought a game of Scrabble, and he dutifully tried so hard to play with me, but I let him off the hook after a couple of days. It was agonizing to watch. So for me, at this stage of my life, I'm now in my 60s, hard to believe, I know, but anyway, I can look back over many years and kind of draw that thread of God's spiritual gift and see that thread in my life. And probably for the first flag was when I was about 19, and I was part of a home group, a life group, and the leader had invited someone to come and speak to us, to share with us. And so that night they wheeled this woman in the door. She was in a wheelchair. Now, she had had cerebral palsy all her life. All of her limbs were out of her control. She couldn't feed herself. She couldn't toilet herself. But she had spiritual gifts. I tell you, no one is excluded here. And as she shared her story, it was an amazing story. You could, very difficult to understand her, but God spoke through her. But she also had another gift, and this was the gift of prophecy. And so she prophesied something over a number of us. And when she came to me, she prophesied over me. Now, I just have to say, someone once asked me to draw myself on a page as an animal. Have you ever done that? I mean, if you were an animal, what would you be? And straight away when someone asked me that, I drew a mouse. I'm a mouse. I've always been really shy. I've always been really super self-conscious. And at that stage when I was 19, it was extreme. I was the mouse in the corner, very quiet. And this woman came and she prophesied over me. And she said, "You will have authority." What? Wrong person. Your gift didn't work that time. But, it was like, it's bizarre. This is the last person in the room you would have said that to. And she said I was going to have authority, like leadership. So I tucked that away because for the next 20 years, there was no evidence to me of that gifting. We got married, I had children, we went to Manila for 10 years. I faithfully struggled through those years, but one thing I did really struggle with was that I saw no evidence in myself of gifting. Now, when I got to my 40th year, this is when we hit Auckland, and I consciously thought, I am no good at anything, and I don't see any spiritual gift in me. But in that year, I went to work at a women's refuge. My heart was for these women, and after a few months, probably after about a year, it was like this door opened, and it was the door of leadership. And the woman who was running that place was leaving, and something just bubbled up within me. There was just this desire that bubbled up, and I thought, I want to do that. I want to run this place. I have absolutely no idea if I can. In fact, there's no evidence in my life that I would have the gifts to do that. However, I want to do it. And I believe that I just need to take my courage in my hands and walk through that door and give it a go. So I did. I walked through that door, and I kept expecting it to all go terribly wrong. But it didn't. It actually went really well. It just kind of got better and better. And in fact, after that point, it's like doors just kept opening in front of me. And I was asked to do more and more in terms of leadership. So that went on for about, 15, 20 years that I was in leadership roles. But a few years ago, I felt that I was to leave the job, because around our gift sometimes there come structures and roles, and I had this big job of leadership. But I felt I was to leave the job, and Mick and I went off to Wanganui, ends of the earth, little town. But the gift goes with us. The gift is something God has given, not something someone else has given to us. And so we went to Wanganui, and I wondered what God would do. Well, just a few stories of how God has opened doors for me there. And I was in Wanganui for a year or so, and then I got this phone call. There's this group in Asia, and they work with women who are forced into prostitution, and they asked me to come on the board. So I went on the board, the first board meeting. I asked a few pertinent questions. Next thing I find, I'm flying off to Asia to help them sort out a leadership crisis. I mean, amazing. God just opened that door. Another thing locally is that there was a second-hand shop run by the local city mission, and it was in chaos and disaster, and the manager was about to leave. And they said, would you come in and help us to sort this out? So I did that for a number of months, and that's now a healthy, thriving little shop with a happy manager. And then just recently, I have this passion to make pottery. It's my latest little addiction. And I was sitting like a little mouse in the corner of the club rooms one day, and this woman comes up to me and she says, "Oh, would you come on the committee?" And I thought, yes, I'd quite like to run this place. So, well, let's see what happens with that. Because, our God is a generous God, and he has a gift in each one of you.
Thanks, Ruby. So, people, do you know your spiritual gift? Now, I'm not talking about whether you know your natural talent. I'm not talking about whether you know that which you were born with. I'm not talking about your, a skill set that somehow, you've grown up with. I'm asking, do you know your spiritual gift? I mean, there are many different types of gifts. I mean, some people have this incredible gift of hospitality. I mean, have you ever been in some people's places and they're trying hard to be hospitable? And it's like, you're walking on eggshells. They ain't got the gift. But have you been in other people's places and like they're really, really hospitable and it's like you just feel so at home. It's like, this is my home. They could have very well the gift. Do you see what I mean? I mean, Ruby and I belonged in a church where, some people, they get the gift of beauty. And it's kind of like people who have been spiritually endowed to do works of beauty around artistic expressions. And in this particular church, I mean, so many churches are bland and boring. You walk in and it's like you've walked into a corporate scene. Am I right or right? And we won't make commentary about this church. And anyway, and you walk into a building, and this church was like that. And so what this pastor did, he got all those that the Holy Spirit had come upon, who were endowed with creative, artistic ability. People with leather, people with color, people with jewelry, people with this, people with that. And he said, I now set you loose on this building. Oh, they created sacred space. Absolutely wonderful. And then there are other people, and, they have the gift of a word of knowledge. Have you heard of this, people? Sometimes, and look, I tell you, a friend of mine told me this story very recently, and I've got his permission to repeat it. And so he and his wife, they really struggled to have a child. They had their first child after much kind of struggle and labor. And then they wanted to try for a second child. Couldn't happen. Then they did IVF. It doesn't matter, but IVF? Yeah, she's trying to be a leader. Then they did IVF, and that didn't happen for them. They went to the doctor. The doctor did the test, and he discovered that there was a kind of a malfunction in his testes. That there was something in there that was bigger than what it was. There was a vein that was bigger than what it was meant to be, and it overheated, and it fried certain things. I'll just leave it. And you get the picture. And so he attended this meeting, this fellowship. And another person in the fellowship had a word of knowledge. So this person stood up and said, I am seeing someone's private parts. And you need prayer. Now, my friend who had the problem with his private parts, do you think he put his hand up at that point? I mean, as he was telling me the story, this is Paul. But as Paul, I'll just mention the first name. As Paul was telling me, I was in absolute stitches, And then after the meeting, though, this guy Paul went to the person who had the word of knowledge and said, by the way, that was me. And then Paul said, can you pray for me? And the guy prayed for him. Very soon afterwards, his wife was pregnant with their sick. Now, I know that doesn't happen to everyone, but it happened in this particular instance. What God does, sometimes he doesn't do all the time. I heard of this amazing story of, again, Christians who gather in places like this. And there was a guy by the name of Scott, and he was like seated there. And 2 rows back, there was a guy called John. And then as they were sort of standing and singing and praising and worshiping, Scott, he got this kind of word of knowledge, if you like, to go and give John a gentle but firm hug. And Scott's thinking, this is absolute rubbish. But it came to him again, go give. And so Scott, knowing that you've got to be responsive with this sort of stuff, everyone was talking, he just pulled the chairs apart and he went to John and he put his arms around him and gave him this gentle but firm hug and stayed there for some time. And then they locked eyes and John was crying. And Scott said, where are these tears coming from? And John told him the story. John had been raised by this very strict, authoritarian kind of minister, pastor, father. He had to receive healing because of that kind of upbringing, inner healing. And he was just kind of coming right. He was now in his 30s. And then that very week, his father came and visited John and said to John, by the way, I just consider you just one big major disappointment. And that just spiraled John downwards again. And so John went to his God and said to his God, God, how do you feel about me? And then the following Sunday in church, what happened? He got a gentle but firm hug. Isn't this nice? Isn't it great that when we go with our spiritual gifting, flourishing occurs? Something happens. But do you know what the research tells us? The research tells us that in any given church, maybe not Green Lane, I don't know, but in any given church, 3/4 of people do not know their spiritual gift. Should we do a show of hands? 3/4 of people do not know their spiritual gift. Do you know what happens instead in most churches, if not all churches? What happens is that good, kind, and loyal people like yourselves, they go to the leaders of the church and they go to the pastors of the church and they basically say, hey, look, where can I help out? Where can I serve? I'd like to volunteer. And so the pastors and leaders, they say, oh, well, you can go over there, and if it doesn't work after a while, we'll shift you somewhere else. But, oh, thanks so much that you're willing to volunteer. And so we end up with churches that are full of volunteers. Now, I am not wanting to knock volunteerism, but the founder of the church and the founder of this church, by the way, that's not Terry, Jesus Christ, the founder of the church, he had a different model in mind. And his model basically goes like this. He comes to you and he says, I choose you. I choose you. I choose you. I want you to be on my team. I choose you for my team. Oh, this is such good stuff. I want you on my team. I so want you on my team that I'm going to gift you for a certain position in the team. But please hear, I want you to play in this position on the team. I don't want you to volunteer over there. I don't want you over there. I want you here playing in this position on the team. And when you play in your position on the team and everybody else plays on their position in the team, we will be a great team here at Green Lane. But for that to happen, you've got to know where you are gifted. You are the gifted ones. You are gifted. So you've got to know your spiritual gift. How do you know what your spiritual gift is? Goes like this. Do you want to know? Oh, okay, I'll stop then. Do you want to know? It's very brief. I mean, sometimes you do these things and they're way overly calculating and complex, and you give up halfway through. I think there are 5 signposts. 5 kind of questions that you can ask yourself. So you might like to get this video at the end, later during the week and go through it again. But I'll do it very, very briefly and then we're done. Kind of goes like this. The first signpost, the first question is there something in your life that you love to do the preparation work for? You know, some people like the end product, the outcome. I'm not asking that. What is there currently in your life? And when it comes to do the preparation, you just kind of involuntarily salivate. I can't wait to do the prepping. I have people come up to me, you know, invariably, and they say, "Oh, Mick, I'd love to be a presenter like you. I just want." And I say, "Oh, really? So do you love to do the preparation? I mean, do you love to do the reading, the research, the writing? No. Oh, no. I'm lucky if I get through 1 book a year." I know that they ain't got that gift. If you love the prepping for something, it's a signpost that could be the area of your gifting. Okay? The second question that you ask yourself is there an area in your life that when you do this particular thing, whatever it is, I don't know, you just get this creativity. I mean, you're just full of ideas. You're a buzz with, I could do this and I could do this and I could do this. I mean, you show me someone, you know, like with the gift of mercy, and they're just a buzz with how they could do it in so many different ways. Creativity kicks in. Third thing is there's something in your life where you find yourself saying to yourself, if only we had more people like this, it would change the world. You know, Ruby's a leader, and she's a way better leader than me. And I often hear Ruby say, if only there were more better leaders, the churches, this world, this country would be a better place. She's got that absolute conviction that leadership will do the job. Have you got that feeling about something in your life? Way different from Ruby's or mine. That could be a signpost. A fourth signpost. What is the fourth signpost? No, I've got my notes and they're better than yours. That's right. Is there something in your life where you find people and they just keep coming up to you and saying, "You're really good at that. You're good at that. You're good at that." In other words, it's unsolicited affirmation. Is there something? And finally, is there something in your life that when you do it, you have this overwhelming sense that God smiles? See, when I'm up here, the heavens are smiling. I know, I believe it. God is smiling. He's loving this moment. I really do sense that. He's so pleased. Do you know what I mean? It's like he and I are dancing. I just have this sense he's smiling. Go, Mick. Go, Jesus. You know, he's smiling. So those are the 5 signposts. What was number 1? You love the prep. What was number 2? Just surge of creativity. What was number 3? Absolute conviction this will change the world. What was number 4? Unsolicited affirmation. Number 5. God is smiling. Do you know your spiritual gift? Do you get a sense of it after those 5 signposts? Have a discussion with the person next to you. Go do it. Okay, friends, here we go. I've just got 1 minute to go, and then I'm finished, and it goes like this. If I was to ask each one of you, and I'm not asking this morning, but if I was to ask each one of you to turn to the person next to you and for you to give them your name and your address and your suburb and your mobile number, so I'm not asking you to do that, but if I did ask you to do that, you could possibly give the answer for all of those questions in 30 seconds, just like that. If I was to come back here next year, who knows, this might be my last time with you. I've been here several times in the last couple of years. But if I was to come back in a year's time and ask you, well, if you can give your name, your mobile number and address in 30 seconds, turn to the person next to you and tell them your spiritual giftings, because we end up with more than one, your spiritual giftings. If you can't do that within 30 seconds in a year's time, do you know what I'd be tempted to do? To grab you by the collar and just so rattle your cage. Now why? Because you see, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12:1, he says, do not be ignorant about your spiritual gifting. Don't be ignorant. In 1 Corinthians 14 verse 1, he's even stronger. And Paul says, long for the spiritual gifts. Long for them. Settle the desires of your heart, the appetites, the passions. This is something that you are to long for. You see, each and every person in this room, you have two callings on your life. You have a common calling, which is like your day job. The Apostle Paul had a day job. He was really good with leather and dye. He had a common calling. A lot of you have a day job, be it inside the home or outside of the home. But as Christ followers, you are not to limit yourself to your common calling. You are also to have an uncommon calling. And the uncommon calling, like Paul, is that you are to have a calling shaped around your spiritual gifting. So these two callings are meant to be on your life, not just one. And what happens in churches like this is that we end up with people who know their common calling and they're so dedicated to it, understandably rightly so. But as Christ followers, you are also to have an uncommon calling shaped around your spiritual gifting. And it says in 1 Timothy chapter 4, 14 and 15, and it says in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 6, you are to give your life over to the spiritual gifts. In fact, it says be devoted to them. And that word devoted carries the idea of giving yourselves over to them such that your spiritual gifts, they shape most of the decision making in your life. And if you can get to that place, you end up living a dedicated life, but also a devoted life. And it is so good. It's so good. I said to Jonathan, this could be the last time I'm here. And I thought, what would be the one message I'd want to communicate if it was the last time I'm with you? And it's the one that I've just given. Be dedicated to your common calling, your day jobs, but be devoted to the area of your spiritual gifting and give yourself to the flames and